I'm 76 years old and I want to say something that took me an embarrassingly long time to understand. Most of you watching this are going to die alone, not abandoned, not unloved, just alone, the way most people actually end up at the end. And for most of my life, I believed that only happened to people who had done something wrong. I was not someone who did things wrong. That's what makes this worth telling you. I taught second grade for 31 years at the same elementary school in Naperville, Illinois. 31 years. I knew every secretary, both the principals I worked under, the custodian named Hector, who retired in 2004, and sent me a Christmas card every year until he died. I knew hundreds of children by name. At my retirement party in 2009, 43 people came. I counted. I was married for 22 years to a man named Frank. We had a daughter, Claire, who is 43 now and lives in Seattle. Frank and I were not a dramatic couple. We didn't fight badly or drink or give anyone a reason to worry about us. He came home on a Tuesday in October of 1998 and told me he hadn't been happy for a long time, and there was someone else, and he was moving out at the end of the month. I was 49. Claire was a junior in high school. I could make Frank into the story here. I'm not going to. He was a man who waited 22 years to say something honest. That's its own kind of failure, but it wasn't cruelty. We had grown into two different people without ever discussing it. And then one of us finally said so. What I've never told anyone is that when he told me, my first thought wasn't about him or even about Claire. It was about Saturday mornings. We had a routine: eggs and the newspaper and WBBM on low. We'd been doing it since 1978. For 3 weeks after he left, I kept filling 2 cups of coffee before I remembered. Then I stopped. There was a man some years after Frank. His name was Dennis. He was a widower, a retired engineer, pleasant, polite, nothing wrong with him at all. We had dinner 6 or 7 times over the course of a winter. On the 7th dinner, he told me he thought we had something real and asked what I thought. I told him I'd think about it. I never called him back, not because I didn't like him, because somewhere in those dinners I had realized I was performing again, laughing at the right moments, steering conversation, making myself easy company, and I was so tired of it. Dennis deserves someone who actually wanted to be there. I'm not sure I wanted to be anywhere in particular anymore, except left alone with that feeling long enough to understand it. I had friends, real ones, or what passed for real over 30 years. Carol, Deb, Janet, a woman named Ruth I'd known since we were both 26, and standing in line at a polling station in November of 1973. We went to each other's houses, threw birthday parties, helped each other through things. I was the one who organized. I remembered birthdays, brought the right wine, called people on anniversaries of bad things that happened to them. I thought that was generosity. I think now it was also a way of never sitting still, because if I was useful, I was needed. And if I was needed, I didn't have to think too carefully about whether I was actually happy. That's a distinction I didn't understand for a very long time. After Frank left, I went deeper into school. More committees, more staying late, more being the person other teachers came to when they were struggling. I remember a young teacher named Melissa, maybe her second year, sitting in my classroom after 5 o'clock crying because she didn't think she was good enough. I sat with her for an hour and a half. I said everything right, and I drove home and could not tell you a single thing I was actually feeling because I had stopped checking. Beloved is the word people used about me. I heard it at my retirement party 3 times. I was also more tired than I'd ever admitted to anyone. Claire left for college in 2000, and the house on Westfield Drive got so quiet, I started leaving the television on in the other room, not watching it, just for the sound of voices in the background. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has done that. I'm also sure most people wouldn't admit it. I retired in 2009 and moved to a smaller place near downtown. Thought being around people passing by and coffee shops would help. And for a while, yes. I had coffee most mornings at a place on Washington Street where the woman behind the counter knew my name and my order. For about a year, I told myself that counted for something. It did a little. Then they closed, and the new place didn't know me. And I realized I'd been renting the feeling of belonging for the price of a medium dark roast. But things change when you're in your 60s, and you're not paying attention to them changing. Ruth moved to Florida in 2012 because her husband's heart needed warmer winters. Carol's husband died in 2014, and she moved in with her daughter in Phoenix the next year. Deb and I drifted in the way that 2 people drift when there's no argument to point to, just fewer calls, and then one day you realize you haven't spoken in 14 months, and you don't know how that happened. Janet is still in Naperville. We have lunch every few months. It's fine. It's just not what it was. And I stopped pretending otherwise about 2 years ago. Claire calls on Sundays, 20 minutes, sometimes 30. She tells me about the kids. I tell her what I've been up to, which is usually not a great deal. And we say, I love you, and that's that. She's a good daughter. She does what she can from 2,000 miles away. I'm not saying it as a complaint. About 2 years ago, I had a week in March where I did not speak to anyone in person for 6 days. Not one conversation. I ordered groceries to the door. I went to a doctor's appointment on the Thursday, and the woman at the check-in desk said, "How are you today?" And I said, "Fine, thank you." And that was the full extent of my human contact until Sunday's phone call. I sat down after that week expecting to feel devastated. That's the appropriate feeling. That's what you're supposed to feel when you're 74 years old and nobody has spoken to you for 6 days. Instead, I felt something I did not have a word for immediately. It took me about a week to find the word. The word was myself. I had been performing since I was roughly 24 years old. I don't mean falsely. I genuinely loved teaching. I genuinely cared about my friends. But there is a version of yourself you become in company, and there is the one that exists when nobody at all is looking. I had spent 50 years in company, and I had almost no acquaintance with the second one. In that quiet week, I found out things, small things, but they surprised me. I found out I liked reading until 2 a.m. when the mood struck me, which it never had when I was keeping sensible hours for school. I found out I had opinions about things I had never bothered to form opinions about because someone else was always talking when those topics came up. I found out I didn't miss most social obligations, that I had been showing up to things for 40 years out of habit, and the fear of what people would think if I didn't, not out of any genuine wanting to be there. That was a strange thing to discover at 74, uncomfortable before it was anything else. Here is what I think, and I'll say it plainly. The fear of dying alone drives people to do things that cost them their actual lives. They stay in marriages that make them smaller because at least someone is there. They fill every hour because the hour with nothing in it is too frightening. They mistake company for closeness and noise for belonging. And the thing is, you can die with someone holding your hand and still have been alone your whole life. You can be surrounded by people who love a version of you that was mostly performance. That's not connection. That is just a room that isn't empty. Being actually known by another person, really known, the inconvenient parts included, is rarer than we say it is. And when it does happen, it doesn't require them to be in the room at the end. It just requires that at some point you stop performing long enough for them to see you. I don't know how many years I have. My health is all right for 76. Probably a few more. I'm not afraid of spending them quietly. I'm somewhat afraid of the actual physical fact of dying. Most people are, I think, whatever they tell you. But I'm not afraid of it being without an audience. Because I've had a few years now of being in my own company, and I've found out the company is tolerable, sometimes better than that. If you're younger than me and this is sitting with you somewhere, here is the only thing I'd offer. Stop spending so much of your life running from the quiet, because the thing you're afraid of finding there is probably just yourself. And that is not as frightening as everyone's been leading you to believe. Most people never stop long enough to find out. If this made you think of someone you've been meaning to call, or a question you've been putting off asking yourself, that seems worth something. That's all I've got.